In this video, I'll be explaining exactly what I do to collect Watch for Rolling Rocks in 0.5 A-presses. But first, we need to clear something up, because every time I post a half A-press video, I get the same comments over and over asking what it means, even though I always have a whole paragraph in the description explaining it, which even starts with, if you're wondering what a half A-press is, read this before commenting to ask. But maybe what you guys need isn't a paragraph. Maybe you guys need an example. So, consider Wing Mario over the rainbow. Not even the whole star, just consider getting to that cannon platform, which is a necessary part of getting the star. So, how many A-presses does it take to get there? Well, if you say 0, that's wrong, because then Mario can't go far enough. If you say 1, well, it's true that Mario can get there with 1, but we can do a little better. We can do it in half an A-press. To do that, we start the level already holding A, and then we use that A-press to reach the platform. Now, hold on. I know what you're thinking. An A-press is an A-press. You can't say it's only a half. Well, TJ, Henry, Yoshi, hear me out. An A-press actually has 3 parts to it. When A is pressed, when A is held, and when A is released. And together, this forms one complete A-press. Now, usually it's the pressing that's useful, because that's the only part that makes Mario jump. However, sometimes it's sufficient to just use the holding part, which allows Mario to do little kicks, to swim in water, to fall slowly while twirling, and to fall slowly with the wing cap. And as for the release, well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important, so don't worry about that part. Now, if we map out the required A-presses for Wing Mario over the rainbow, it would look like this. We merely need to hold A to reach the cannon platform, we need to press A to launch from the first cannon, and we need to press A again to launch from the second cannon. So, how many A-presses is that total? Well, it appears to be 3, and if we were doing this star in isolation, then yeah, it would be 3. But, in a full game A-button challenge run, there are other A-presses that occur earlier in the run, such as this A-press needed to get into the course. So, if we take that A-press into consideration as well, then how many A-presses would it take? The naive answer would be 4, 1 to enter the course, and the 3 within the course that we established earlier. However, we can do better. We can actually do it in 3 by simply holding out the first A-press to be used for the half A-press, because the half A-press only required A to be held, not actually pressed. So in this fashion, Wing Mario over the rainbow only adds on an additional 2 A-presses to the run, since the first A-press just leeches off of a previous A-press. So to capture this phenomenon, we call it 2.5 A-presses. On a single star basis, you'd round that up to 3, but in a full game run, you'd round it down to 2. So, in conclusion, since that first A-press counts in some contexts, but adds no additional A-presses in other contexts, we refer to it as a half A-press. So, going back to the video, you can see that I start the level with the A button already held, as indicated in the bottom left corner. And so in the full game run, this A-press will just leech off of a previous one, and so it won't incur an additional A-press. Okay, glad that's explained. Now, what am I doing in the video? Here, I'm using a trick called Scuttlebug Transportation. You see, like most enemies, Scuttlebugs have a home, which is just a point in 3D space, and they'll patrol a certain radius around that point. So, if Mario enters that radius, they'll lunge at him to attack. But, unlike most other enemies, a Scuttlebug's home can change positions, because if a Scuttlebug bumps into Mario, the Scuttlebug's home will update to where the Scuttlebug was when the collision occurred. So, by strategically luring the Scuttlebug to the edge of its radius and bumping into it, we can effectively transport the Scuttlebug and its home. So, that's what I'm doing here. Note that we can't actually transport a Scuttlebug to outside of its native room. They actually get stuck at the door. So, if your dream was to bring all the Scuttlebugs together for one big jamboree, I'm sorry, but it's not gonna happen. Also worth noting is that Scuttlebugs will actually disappear if they walk into a wall while too far below their current home. So I do have to be careful to avoid that. It's pretty weird if you've never seen it before, but I'm pretty sure they did it so that if a Scuttlebug jumps into a hole, it wouldn't just walk around down there. Anyway, I'm transporting the Scuttlebug to the corner right below the Watch for Rolling Rocks star, because next I do a trick called Scuttlebug raising, and here's how it works. On the left, I show a bird's eye view of the scene, and on the right, I show a view from the side. Now, when Mario leaves the Rolling Rocks room, the Scuttlebug deactivates. That's because the room, and everything in it, are only active when Mario's in the room, or standing in a small region right outside the door, indicated here in yellow. So, if Mario isn't in the Rolling Rocks room or in the yellow region, then the room will be completely black, and everything in the room will be invisible and won't move. Conveniently, this allows us to raise the Scuttlebug by performing the following steps. First, Mario enters the Scuttlebug's radius. Although the Scuttlebug is invisible and can't move around, it can still turn towards Mario and activate a lunge. Then, Mario leaves the radius and the Scuttlebug returns to facing its home. Next, Mario enters the yellow region to activate the Scuttlebug. The Scuttlebug will perform the lunge that it started, but cleverly, we have Mario exit the yellow region right when the Scuttlebug is at the peak of its trajectory, thereby deactivating it so it won't fall down. And finally, since the Scuttlebug moved past its home, it turns around to face its home once more. Now, we've gotten all the height we could out of the Scuttlebug's current lunge, but that's no problem because we can just activate another lunge by repeating this procedure. Activate a lunge while the Scuttlebug is deactivated, reactivate the Scuttlebug just for the upwards portion of its trajectory, and then repeat. As simple as that. So that's what I do here, and I have a second screen to show it from the Scuttlebug's perspective. Fortunately, the Scuttlebug's radius isn't a sphere, but a cylinder that extends up and down infinitely. So really, no matter how high the Scuttlebug gets, we can continue to enter its area to activate its lunges and move it upwards. There's no limit to how high we can raise it. Now, it's worth noting that I only activate the Scuttlebug while I'm not inside its radius, so the Scuttlebug will always lunge towards its home and not towards Mario. This causes the Scuttlebug to effectively travel straight up above its home, but alternatively, I could have activated the Scuttlebug while inside of its radius, and in that case, the Scuttlebug would always lunge towards Mario instead of towards its home. So it would actually make its way towards the door and then travel straight up from there. That method's actually a little faster because we wouldn't have to wait for the Scuttlebug to turn back towards its home before each activation. However, it wouldn't work for what we're doing because we need the Scuttlebug to be right next to that corner. In fact, the top of that corner has a special property which we call a misalignment. Basically, in the game's code, there's a discrepancy between the way the game handles collision checking with floors versus walls. This results in a 1x1 unit area where Mario can get under the floor without being pushed away by the walls. And if Mario's less than 79 units under a floor, he'll snap right up onto it. So that'll be important later for getting up there. Anyway, now it's time to build up some speed, and I mean a lot of speed. So to get that speed, we're going to use a trick called hyperspeed walking, and here's how it works. You probably already know that there are some slopes in the game that are too steep to stand on. Mario just slides off of them. But did you know that you actually can stand on these slopes if they're submerged in shallow water? In fact, the underwater portion of these slopes has a special property. If you try running uphill on them, you'll end up running backwards at an increasing speed with no upper bound. But in most circumstances, this would cause us to end up in the water before building up any real speed. We can get a little more speed by running nearly parallel to the slope but ever so slightly uphill, but eventually the slope runs out, or we move too fast to round a corner. But there are some ways to have Mario walk while staying in place. For example, if there's a wall perpendicular to the slope, then we can use that. That allows Mario to build up quite a bit of speed before he breaks through. However, if the wall isn't perpendicular to the slope, then we end up sliding down into the water. That's because walls are really just rectangles that push Mario out perpendicularly. So, if Mario moves into a wall at an angle, the game will calculate his intended next position, then the wall will push that position out, and then Mario ends up having a net movement along the wall, so ultimately, he'll end up moving into the water. So, is all hope lost? Well no, because Tyler Caney figured out that we could actually make use of the gate. You see, the bottom of the gate is a ceiling, and the game doesn't like putting Mario too close to the area right under a ceiling because it doesn't think he fits. So, if we have Mario move backwards into the ceiling, the game will choose not to move him, so we're free to build up speed in place. but not infinite speed because we'd end up breaking free if our speed moved past the gate. So what do? We turn to redirect our speed out of bounds. Notice that we now have enough speed so that our intended next position is past the wall and out of bounds. And since the game doesn't like placing Mario out of bounds, it doesn't move him, and instead just lets him stay in place, just like the ceiling. But unlike the ceiling, out of bounds goes on forever, so we can essentially build up as much speed as we want without having to worry about breaking free. So now I do just that. Open the gate, use the ceiling of the gate to build up some speed, and then redirect my angle out of bounds to build up the rest. Now, you're probably wondering what I'm going to need all this speed for. After all, I do build up speed for 12 hours. But to answer that, we need to talk about parallel universes. And if you thought my other tangents were complicated, just you wait. Okay, so Mario's position is a floating point number, but it's converted to a short when the game uses it to test for collision with floor triangles. In other words, Mario's position can basically be any decimal number, but it's converted to an integer between negative 32,768 and positive 32,767 inclusive. So, any fractional portion is truncated, and numbers too big or too small are moved into this range using the modulo operator. Graphically, that means that the position used for floor detection is always inside of this box, so if Mario's in that box, then his actual position and the position used for floor detection are the same, albeit maybe off by a single fraction due to the truncation. But if Mario leaves that box, then his actual position and the position used for floor detection will separate, since the position used for floor detection will just loop back around to remain in the original box. So now I ask you this. Here's the course. So if Mario is standing way over here where there's no land, but the position used for floor detection is on land, can he stand over here? The answer is yes. As far as the game sees it, Mario is in fact above land over here because the game actually checks for land over here. So, for all intents and purposes, there is essentially land over here, a copy of the original map, and this is what we call a parallel universe, or a PU. And this applies to every one of these boxes, so there's actually a grid of nearly infinite PUs. Here is a to-scale diagram of the PU grid. As you can see, the PUs are actually pretty far apart, but I'll be taking some creative liberties and drawing them closer together for the sake of clearer visuals. Now, PUs aren't as glamorous as you might think. The graphics are only found on the original map, so the PUs are completely invisible. Furthermore, PUs have no objects, like elevators or item blocks, no enemies, no items, like coins or stars, and not even any walls. So really, it's pretty barren. Furthermore, the N64 console will actually crash if you go to a PU and let the camera follow you, but luckily, we can avoid that crash by fixing the camera in place on the original map before leaving it, though that does make it even harder to tell what's going on in the PUs. So, as you just saw, you can travel to a PU if you have enough speed, but it's not as simple as you might think. If you have just enough speed to reach the PU one over, it won't actually work. That's because the game actually checks if Mario is above land at each quarter step of his movement. That means the simplest PU movement is moving over 4 PUs at once. That way, each quarter step is above land and therefore valid. For simplicity, we call this quadruple PU distance 1 QPU. Now, up until this point, I've been glossing over a very important detail, which I now need to clear up. What if I told you the distance Mario moves isn't necessarily equal to his speed? For example, look how fast Mario moves at 31 speed on this flat slope, and now compare it to how fast he moves at the same speed on this steeper slope. In both cases, he has about the same speed, but clearly he's moving at different rates. That's because the distance Mario moves is only a portion of his actual speed, and this portion depends on the slope of the ground. The steeper the slope, the smaller this portion is. Note that it only depends on the steepness, not whether Mario's facing uphill, downhill, or sideways on the hill. In these visuals, blue will represent Mario's actual speed, and green will represent the portion of it that he moves, which we call Mario's de facto speed. So in these 3 pictures, Mario has the same speed, but he has different de facto speeds since he's standing on slopes with different steepnesses. So if we want to move 1 QPU, it's not sufficient to have QPU speed. We need QPU de facto speed, which often means our actual speed will need to be greater than 1 QPU to compensate. So to reiterate, we need to increase our speed until our de facto speed syncs up with 1 QPU, and the speed needed to do this is called the syncing speed. So in this diagram, the blue arrow represents the syncing speed. When we have that speed, the quarter steps of the de facto speed sync up with the PUs, and we can move. Now, what I'm showing here is just the lowest, or first syncing speed, aka the speed to move exactly 1 QPU. If we increase our speed, eventually our de facto speed would sync up again when it covers a distance of 2 QPU, and so we'd be able to move at that speed, which is 2 times as fast as before. So in general, any multiple of the lowest syncing speed is itself a syncing speed, and will cover multiple QPU at once. So remember, every slope has a different set of syncing speeds, and this can make routing tricky. For example, in the video where I do PU movement to reach the secret aquarium, I had to traverse several different slopes. First, this slope that I used for hyperspeed walking, then this slope at the edge of the water, then the flat ground of the castle foyer, then the castle stairs, which is really a steep ramp, and then the flat ground of the upstairs. And note that the stairs you see there are actual stairs and not a ramp, so they're just flat ground. Here is a graph showing the syncing speeds for each of these slopes, and so these are the speeds I need in order to have PU movement while standing on each of these slopes. Naturally, the steeper slopes have greater syncing speeds. Now keep in mind that I can only build up speed while I'm on the hyperspeed walking slope. Once I leave it, I can't generate any more speed, so my speed will only decrease from there. So to successfully perform this PU route, I better have generated enough speed to meet each slope's syncing speed in turn. For example, let's say I build up enough speed to reach the first possible syncing speed, and I use that to go to the next slope. Then I could let my speed drop until I reach this slope's syncing speed, go to the next slope, let my speed drop again until I reach this slope's syncing speed, go to the next slope, but then I have a bit of a problem. I have less than the required syncing speed and no way to gain any more. So is this route just impossible? Well no, because these are just these slopes' first syncing speeds. But remember, any multiple of these will work as well. So now let's factor in each slope's second syncing speed as well. These speeds allow Mario to move 2 QPU at once instead of 1. So now if I instead build up enough speed to reach the second syncing speed of that first slope, then I'll actually have enough speed to meet each syncing speed in turn and complete the route. And if that didn't work, we could have considered each slope's third syncing speed and so on until we did get it to work. However, which syncing speed we need to reach initially is kind of a big deal, because reaching that first syncing speed takes about 12 hours, and reaching that second syncing speed takes about 25 hours. So if there's a way to use a lower syncing speed initially, then that's a 12-hour save. So, how much speed will we need to generate for the Watch for Rolling Rocks star? Well, keep in mind that even with access to unlimited horizontal speed, we don't have any improved vertical mobility. So to get to the top of the course, we need to travel up slopes and ride up elevators. So this will be the basic route. Start on the hyperspeed walking slope, navigate along the path up from the lake, ride up this elevator, ride up this other elevator, make our way onto the amazing emergency exit platform, which is the highest point we can reach, and then launch to the Watch for Rolling Rocks platform. By itself, that still won't be enough height, but the scuttlebug we positioned will provide the extra bounce we need. So this is the graph of the syncing speeds of these slopes. Unfortunately, we run into a bit of an issue with the path up from the lake. That area is actually made up of dozens of floor triangles that each have different slopes. But that didn't stop me. After careful observation and scrutiny, I isolated 6 triangles which I named T1 through T6. These triangles have strictly decreasing steepnesses, so we can meet each of their syncing speeds in turn. Additionally, their heights span the entire vertical distance we need to cover to go from bottom to top, without leaving any gaps in between. So, by using the slopes of those 6 triangles, we can complete the blueprint for our route, allowing us to utilize the first syncing speed of that initial slope, so building up speed only takes 12 hours instead of 25. Now, we're almost ready to go back to the video, but there's just some final points I want to make. For example, you don't need to have exactly the syncing speed to traverse PUs. If you have slightly less than the syncing speed, you'll move relatively forwards in the map. If you have slightly more than the sinking speed, you'll move relatively backwards in the map. And the further you deviate from the sinking speed, the greater this relative movement will be. Additionally, if you adjust your angle slightly away from the cardinal direction, you can move relatively sideways. But keep in mind that even the smallest possible angle deviation will be magnified over the QPU distance, and thus, Mario will be sent multiple feet to the side. Now, based off what I've told you, you might think you can only travel multiples of 4 PUs at a time, but that's not actually true. For example, if one of your quarter steps is out of bounds or over a ceiling, then that quarter step will be invalid, and since Mario moves up to but not including the first invalid quarter step, he can in fact end up stopping prematurely at one of the quarter steps. Separately, if you change slopes during a quarter step, your de facto speed will change and you'll alter the distance of the next quarter step, and so most likely it will no longer sync up with a PU and you'll end up stopping on the new slope. Finally, for simplicity, the set of PUs that are multiples of 4 away we call the QPU grid, and if Mario's on the QPU grid, then we say he's QPU aligned. Remember, moving a multiple of 4 PUs is easy, but moving a different amount requires special conditions like out of bounds or changing slopes. So, if you're QPU aligned, it's easy to stay that way, and if you're QPU misaligned, it's easy to stay that way as well. Now, if you become QPU misaligned, you'll need to correct that in order to return to the main map. But that can be difficult if you're not near out of bounds and your sequence of slope changes is predetermined. So, managing your QPU alignment is one of the many challenges of planning a PU route. Okay, so now we're finally ready to resume the main video and watch the PU movement. Just kidding, first I need to explain what these screens are. These extra screens will help you follow along during the PU movement. The standard view is just the view that the game shows, but since I fixed the camera on the main map to prevent the game from crashing, this screen won't tell you very much. The relative view shows where I am in each PU. This is what it would look like if I let the camera follow Mario around, and if PUs weren't invisible. The relative map also shows where I am in each PU, but from an overhead perspective. And finally, the PU map shows where I am in the PU grid. Okay, so now let's really start. So, as I explained earlier, I navigate up the path from the lake using the 6 triangles I isolated, and I've marked them in the relative map so you can follow along. So basically, I get onto a triangle, let my speed drop until I'm around the sinking speed for that triangle slope, then navigate uphill on the triangle, and then move to the next triangle. Using what I taught you, you should be able to follow along with my movement. For example, I'm able to move relatively backwards because I have slightly more than the sinking speed. Whenever I move sideways, it's because I'm slightly angled away from the cardinal direction. And every time I move from triangle to triangle, my QPU alignment changes. But cleverly, I planned it in such a way that they'd all cancel out by the end and I'd end up QPU aligned. So right now, I'm on the 6th triangle, so I do a little zigzag to bring me back towards the main map, as you can see on the PU map screen. Remember, I need to return to the main map in order to access the elevator, since there are no objects in PUs. As you may have noticed right there, the elevator didn't register me until I started kicking, and that's actually the reason why I've been holding A this entire time. By holding A, I can press B to do these little kicks. Without these kicks, I go through the elevator, but with the kicks, I can ride it up to gain precious height. Okay, so now we're closing in on the end. The final movement I do will be a kick onto the amazing emergency exit platform, then turn and launch myself towards the scuttlebug. That movement will bring me 10 PU to the right and 3 PU down, but since I want to end up on the main map, I reverse that displacement and so position myself 3 PU up and 10 PU left. While doing that, I simultaneously position myself in the correct relative part of the map to make the movement work. Okay, now don't blink. And there we go. By bouncing on the scuttlebug and ground pounding in the misalignment, I achieved just enough height to get onto the Rolling Rocks platform. Here, I show an abridged version of the scuttlebug raising, in case earlier's viewing was too choppy to follow. As you can see, the scuttlebug moves back and forth above its home. At the end, you can see I do 2 special raisings purely to move him sideways and closer to the corner, since he ended up being too far away for the bounce to work. And here I show an alternate angle of the final PU movement. The scuttlebug actually became active once I entered the PU version of this room, so I really only had a handful of frames to get over here before he fell too far. And there you have it. Watch for rolling rocks done in 0.5 A presses. Man, I did not expect this video to become 25 minutes long when I started commentating, but I guess there was just that much to explain. Hopefully, you were able to follow along with my explanations and visuals, learn something new, and had an enjoyable experience. So, thanks for watching. So today, I'll be explaining exactly what's going on in this video. You may notice that I don't even start out in tick-tock clock. That's because we first need to use another course to set the HOLP. So, what exactly is the HOLP? HOLP stands for the held object's last position, and it's just a point in 3D space that the game keeps track of. The HOLP starts out at the origin, and then, whenever Mario's holding an object, the HOLP updates to where Mario's holding it. Once Mario releases the object, the HOLP will just stay at the last position Mario held the object at. Note that the HOLP will stay in that position even if you switch courses, or change save files. Now, the HOLP is important because that's where objects appear once Mario releases them. The objects don't just appear in front of Mario, they appear at the HOLP, which is usually in front of Mario. I say usually because there are some glitches that allow you to release an object at the HOLP without having it update to in front of Mario. An example is the hat in hand glitch. When this is done, the HOLP doesn't update, so any object you release will appear wherever you left the HOLP last, which can be at a remote location. So, going back to the game, I used the crazy box in Tall Tall Mountain to set the HOLP to a precise location that I had previously figured out. I could have used any number of courses to set the HOLP here, but Tall Tall Mountain had a pretty fast way to do it, so I settled on that. Now, that's all done before I even entered tick-tock clock, because now I get to start with a very customized HOLP placement. The reason I need it like that is because next I do a glitch called Instant Release. To do this, I dive into a grabbable object and a wall at the same time, and in this case I do it on a Bob-omb. By diving into the Bob-omb, I pick it up, and by diving into the wall, I drop the Bob-omb. Since both of these actions happen on the same frame, I end up releasing the Bob-omb before the HOLP updates, and so the Bob-omb ends up being released where we left the HOLP last. To give you some perspective, here's a map of Tall Tall Mountain, and here's where we place the HOLP. In tick-tock clock's coordinate system, the HOLP is way out of bounds, and that's where the Bob-omb ends up, at the HOLP laterally, but at Mario's current height. Now, the thing about Bob-ombs is that they have an activation radius of 4,000 units. If Mario is outside of that, the Bob-omb deactivates, it disappears and doesn't move at all, and so that's what ends up happening here. Now, my HOLP placement was very precise, because it's far enough away to allow Mario to climb tick-tock clock without activating the Bob-omb, but close enough that Mario can activate the Bob-omb from a higher level, where the activation circle is smaller because a sphere's cross-section gets smaller as you move away from its equator. Anyway, you might be wondering what good it is to reactivate a Bob-omb who's way out of reach. But here's the thing. The game has a fail-safe mechanism so that if you release an object out of bounds, the object snaps to Mario's position. So as soon as we reactivate the Bob-omb, it'll snap directly to Mario. Pretty nifty, huh? So once that's done, we just climb up the clock and be careful to avoid the Bob-omb's activation radius. Now, because the clock parts are frozen, we do need to press A to get past some of the obstacles, but in the end, we'll actually save A presses. And now here comes the final trick. Everything we've done so far has been building up to this final glitch, and this is the major breakthrough. This is what we call a Pedro spot, and it's pretty powerful. You see, once upon a time, a guy named Pedro showed the ABC crew a magical spot in Cool Cool Mountain, where Mario seemed to get stuck. A spot from which Mario could both jump and ground pound, which begged the question, was Mario on the ground or in the air? But a Pedro spot's most useful property is that it allows Mario to gain quite a bit of speed before he breaks out of it. So, how does it work? Well, a Pedro spot has two main requirements, a floor and a ceiling, and they need to be pretty close together. You see, the game doesn't let Mario get too close to the area right below a ceiling, because it doesn't think he fits. However, in tick-tock clock we can get around this by using a Bob-omb, because although Mario can't voluntarily move that close to a ceiling, he can be pushed there by something else, so we use the Bob-omb to move Mario into the Pedro spot. So at this point, Mario's in the air and falling towards a part of the floor that's under the ceiling. So as it always does, the game calculates Mario's intended next position based on his current position and his speed. Then, the game checks how walls, floors, and ceilings would affect this position, in that order. There's no walls here, there is a floor, which moves the intended position upwards onto floor level, and then there's the ceiling. And since the intended position is too close to the ceiling, the game chooses not to move Mario there. So to recap, Mario gets a new vertical position that's exactly equal to his current one because the floor moves him up, and Mario moves nowhere laterally because the ceiling prevents it. So the net effect after one frame is that Mario keeps the exact same position but carries out one frame of air time. And since Mario's forward speed in the air is unbounded, Mario's horizontal speed will increase every frame. That is, until he's moving so fast that his intended position is past the ceiling and he breaks free. So that's exactly what we do here. Note that we needed the clock parts to be frozen so that the edges of the floor and ceiling weren't constantly changing. Once we have enough speed, we can do a double jump straight to the top of the clock, since the height of a double jump is proportional to Mario's speed. Unfortunately, our angle doesn't let us get onto the thwomp, so we do need one more jump to reach the star. And there you have it. Stomp on the thwomp done in 6 A presses, fully explained for your viewing pleasure. Thanks for watching.
Hey guys, it's me, Pannenkoek2012, bringing you Dutch pancakes since 2010. But seriously, when I first started making videos, I showed how to collect 255 coins in all the courses where it was possible to do so. And ever since then, I've received the same questions over and over. Why do I stop at 255 coins? Can you collect more than 255? What would happen if you collected more than 255? So, let's answer these questions once and for all. Now, under normal circumstances, you'd never have to worry about coin limits. After all, the courses are all supposed to have a finite amount of coins, but as you probably know, there are infinite coin glitches. So, what does happen when you try to collect infinite coins? Well, the coin counter will keep track of your coins just as it normally would. Even at 255, it keeps going. Let me repeat that. While you're collecting the coins, the coin counter will neither stop at nor reset at 255 coins. It will just keep counting as if 255 was a regular number. You won't notice anything special at this point. Eventually, you'll reach 999 coins, and it's at this number that the counter stops increasing. Mario can certainly collect more coins at this point, but they won't influence the coin counter at all. And trust me, the coins aren't secretly counting higher while the counter is just stuck at 999. The coins literally do nothing. So the coin counter within the course is pretty simple. It counts to 999 and then stops. However, the coin score that actually gets saved is an entirely different matter, and somewhat of a more complicated one to discuss. But hey, that's what we're here to do. Anyway, once Mario collects a star, he will exit the course, and then the coin counter will count all the way up to the score Mario just got within the course, so somewhere between 0 and 999. Mario receives an extra life at 50, 100, and 150 coins, but at no other increment of 50, so I guess the programmers never expected anyone to get more than 200 coins. Right now, I have to wait all the way for the counter to get to 999. Anyway, the game will compare the coin score you just got to the coin score you already have saved for that course. If the coin score you just got is higher, then it will overwrite your coin score for that course with a new coin score. However, the coin score that gets saved is not necessarily the coin score you just collected. This is where the 255 coin limit comes into play, and where a lot of the confusion comes from. You see, we can calculate the coin score that gets saved using the coin score that you got within the course. Simply take the coin score you got within the course and modulo by 256, and that will give you the coin score that gets saved. If you're unfamiliar with the modulo operation, you can think about it like this. Take the coin score you got within the course and divide by 256. This will give you a quotient and a remainder, and it's this remainder that gets saved. So for our example, we collected 999 within the course. When you divide by 256, that gives you 3, remainder 231. And it's 231 that gets saved, since that's the remainder when you divide by 256. If we check our coin records, we can see that yes, 231 was in fact saved after we collected 999 coins. Here's a little table I made to help simplify this information. I couldn't show the whole table because it was too big, but here's the most important parts of it. As you can see, there are 1,000 possible coin scores you can get within the course, from 0 to 999, but there are only 256 possible coin scores that can be saved, from 0 to 255. So naturally, multiple coin scores within the course save to the same value, and that's illustrated in this table. For example, a coin score of 0, 256, 512, and 768 all save as 0. A coin score of 231, 487, 743, and 999 all save as 231. And a coin score of 255, 511, and 767 all save as 255. So now you can see why people like me tend to stop at 255 coins. Out of all the possible values that can be saved, 255 is the maximum, and so that's what we want to be saved into our coin records. That means we either have to collect 255, 511, or 767 coins. And out of these three values, 255 comes first, so it requires the least amount of effort to get to. And so that's why people stop at 255 coins. One more point I want to stress is that you can actually lower your saved coin score for a course. See, right now I have a record of 231 for Snowman's Land. If I go in, collect 256 coins, and then collect a star, what happens? Well, it compares my record of 256 from within the course to my saved record of 231. Since 256 is greater than 231, it will save a new coin score using the 256. But remember, 256 will save as 0, and so ultimately, it lowers my score from 231 to 0. If I go in and collect 256 coins again, then it will once again be a new record, even though I collected the exact same amount of coins as before, which is because it's comparing the 256 with the 0. Since 256 is higher, it counts as a new record, and so it overwrites my old score of 0 with a new 0. Using this technique, you can achieve any coin record you want between 0 and 255, so long as that course has an infinite coin glitch. Since I have a record of 0 for this course now, it looks like I've never even collected a coin here, despite that I have the 100 coin star. So at this point, I've explained exactly how the coin limits work, but I have yet to explain why the coin limits are there. As we've learned, there are two coin limits. There's the 999 coin limit within the course, and the 255 coin limit in the savable records. But why are these coin limits there? Well, the 999 coin limit was put in intentionally by the programmers as a way to cap off the number of coins Mario can collect. Somewhere in the game, there's a line of code like this. If the number of coins exceeds 999, then set the number of coins back equal to 999. So how does this work in practice? Well, let's say Mario has 997 coins and is about to collect a blue coin. Once he collects it, he'll have 1,002 coins. So if we look at the code, 1,002 is greater than 999, so that becomes true. Therefore, this statement occurs, and the number of coins is set equal to 999. Now all of this is done in less than a frame, so you'd never actually see the intermediate value of 1,002. It would go straight from 997 to 999. And of course, if you collected any more coins at this point, the same thing would happen. The counter would go past 999 and then back to 999. So for us, it would just look like it stays at 999. The 255 coin limit, on the other hand, was done unintentionally by the programmers. It's merely a result of how the coin records are stored in memory using bits. To understand the 255 coin limit, we need to understand the binary system, which is what the game uses, whereas we're probably more accustomed to the decimal system. The binary system is base 2, which means it uses zeros and ones to represent numbers. The decimal system is base 10, which means it uses the digits 0 through 9 to represent numbers. To better understand how the binary system works, let's first review how the decimal system works. Here is a typical decimal number. Each digit represents a different number of tens. So we have the units digit, the tens digit, the hundreds digit, the thousands digit, and the 10,000s digit. To compute the value of this number, we multiply each digit by how much that digit is worth. And when we sum these together, we get 28,341. This seems kind of redundant because we're analyzing the decimal system using the decimal system, but it will make more sense when we analyze the binary system. So here is a typical binary number. Note that its digits comprise of only zeros and ones, so instead of calling them digits, we actually call them bits. Each bit stands for a different number of twos, just like before, except instead of tens, now it's twos. So the bits represent 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and 128 respectively. To compute the value of this number, we simply multiply each bit by how much that bit is worth and sum them all together to get 229. So this is the binary representation of the number 229. Now we can talk about the coin scores. The coin score within the course is represented by 16 bits, whereas the coin score that gets saved is only represented by 8 bits. This means that the coin score within the course has the capacity to hold up to 65,535, even though we know that in practice it will only ever go up to 999. The coin score that gets saved, however, can only hold up to 255. That's why the 255 coin limit's there. Using only 8 bits, 255 is the maximum number you can produce. That's why it's impossible to save a score that's higher than 255. Let's look at an example. Let's say you collect 100 coins within the course. This is how it would be represented using the 16 bits. Now let's say you go to save it. You can't save 16 bits using only 8 bits. Some information is going to be lost. So what does it do? It takes the lower 8 bits and saves that. So in this case, you had 100 coins within the course, and that's saved as 100 coins. So that seems to make sense. But now let's take a look at a bigger number. Now, let's say you collected 999 coins. This is how it would be represented using the 16 bits. Notice that this time, the 999 is so big that it uses bits besides the lower 8 bits. It has 2 ones in the upper 8 bits. So when this number goes to save, it takes the lower 8 bits and saves those. Notice that some information was lost. We didn't store the 999 because that used more than 8 bits. Instead, we only stored its lower 8 bits, which is actually the number 231. So that's why different numbers can be saved than you collected within the course. If you collect a number that uses more than the lower 8 bits, as in a number that's 256 or greater, then some of it will be lost when you go to save it, because when you save a number, it only takes the lower 8 bits, and that might not be the entire number. And of course, this process of taking only the lower 8 bits is synonymous with performing modulo 256, as discussed earlier. This explains why different coin values within the course all save as the same value. Here, we can see 4 distinct coin values, 0, 256, 512, and 768. Notice that they all differ in their upper 8 bits, but their lower 8 bits are the same. So, when we go to save these values, they all save as the same value, since their lower 8 bits match. So by now, I've answered all of your questions concerning the coin limits. But now I have a question. You see, in my videos, I've always collected the maximum coin scores that could be saved. But this begs the question, what would be the maximum coin scores within the courses? Under this condition, we would no longer be bound by 255, so instead we would aim for 999. But can this be achieved? Well, let's walk through the courses. For Bob on Battlefield, you might think that the best way would be to collect as many coin clones as you could. The thing about coin clones though, is that each one takes up a slot in memory, and we only have 240 slots to work with. So, long before you reach to 999 coins, you would run out of slots, and the game would freeze. Lucky for us, there's a second infinite coin glitch in this course, the breaking/disappearing cork box glitch. If we break a cork box right as it disappears, then we get its 3 coins and the box is back. With this technique, there's no entropy. There's nothing left over each time that would build up, like the coin clones, so this method is completely renewable. Consequently, we can just keep doing this until we reach 999 coins, and therefore 999 is the maximum we can collect within Bob-omb Battlefield.
For Womp's Fortress, we can use the same strategy. Just keep breaking the cork box until we have 999 coins. You don't even need to collect any other coins on the course.
Then we get into the courses without infinite coin glitches. For Jolly Roger Bay, the limit is just 104, since that's how many coins there are in the course naturally. There's no infinite coin glitches here to make more. And no, you cannot use the shell to clone coins. You can bring the shell out of water, but it's still real. It won't turn into other objects, and there's no loading points in Jolly Roger Bay to go through, so you cannot use the shell to surpass 104. Similarly, for Cool Cool Mountain, the most we can get is 154, since there's no infinite coin glitches here either. Same thing for Big Boo's Haunt. No infinite coin glitch, so we're bound to 151. Just make sure you don't pick the first star, otherwise you won't have access to the booths in the merry-go-round. Now, I know that I showed it was possible to clone a coin in this course, but we can't actually use that to get infinite coins. There are two problems. First, the crazy box doesn't respawn, so unlike the cork boxes or bob-ombs, we can't use it over and over. At best, we can only get one clone out of it. And secondly, there are no good coins to clone in this course. Ideally, we'd want a line or ring of coins, but in this course all we have are enemy coins. Here, I'll demonstrate the difference between the two scenarios. When Mario clones a coin from a ring or line, he can collect the clone, and then he can leave and come back, and all of those coins will regenerate, so he can collect all of those. So essentially, he's collecting an extra coin. In the second scenario, Mario clones a coin from an enemy, but notice that this time, the coins from the enemy don't regenerate from leaving and coming back. They only load once when the enemy dies. And so, essentially, Mario's just collecting one of those coins in a different location, rather than collecting an extra coin. As you can see, Mario collected 4 coins in the former scenario, but only 3 coins in the latter. So this doesn't actually help us get any extra coins. In fact, we're actually losing 5 coins, since we never actually explode the crazy box. For Hazy Maze Cave, there are also no infinite coin glitches, so we're stuck at 139. I tried to find an infinite coin glitch using the swoopers, but it didn't really pan out. Get it? Pannenkoek? Let's just go to the next course. And finally, for Lethal Lava Land, there are no infinite coin glitches, so the most you can get is 133. But be careful about that last bully. If you miss his coin, you have to do it all over again. For Shifting Sandland, we can get to 999 just by using the cork box glitch again, like we did for Bob-omb Battlefield and Womp's Fortress. Pretty standard. We don't even need to enter the pyramid. For Dire Docks, our only infinite coin method is cloning, but here we actually can get to 999 coins doing it. You see, when we go through the loading point, the clones disappear, and so they won't build up like they would in Bob-omb Battlefield. So, using cloning, we actually can get all the way up to 999 coins. For Snowman's Land, we can just duplicate money bags and kill them off periodically until we get up to 999 coins. Just don't make too many money bags at once or weird things can happen. Like look, now everyone's shadow is a white square that's in front of everything else? That doesn't make any sense. And we lost the HUD, and what was that blue thing? Oh great, and now the game froze. I still want to know what that blue thing was though. For Wet Dry World, we can get to 999 coins the same way we did in Dire Docks. The loading point causes the clones to disappear, so we can just keep cloning over and over until we get to 999. For Tall Mountain, our only infinite coin method is cloning, and so the clones will build up. But there's a solution. Before the game freezes, we just need to enter the slide, and when we come out, all the clones will be gone. Essentially, the course just resets, and so using this method, we can make as many clones as we want, and get all the way to 999 coins. And then for Tiny Huge Island, we can just perform the Piranha Plant glitch infinite times. Nothing builds up each time, so there's no problem getting to 999 coins. And now for the final 2 courses. This is where things get interesting. Up until now, the maximum coin scores within the courses have all been pretty simple. Either they were the regular coin limits when there were no infinite coin glitches, or they were 999 when there were infinite coin glitches, since we could use those infinite coin glitches an unlimited number of times. But not here. These last two courses both have an infinite coin glitch, namely coin cloning, but there's no way to avoid the buildup of clones. There's no cork box, so that we can use that method instead. There's no loading points to unload the clones, and there's no slide to reset the course. So for these last two courses, we'll be able to use cloning to get past their normal coin limits, but not all the way up to 999. Instead, we'll end up having to stop at what will seem like a completely arbitrary number, but it will in fact be the maximum coin score within the course. So, let's get to it. Our goal is to fit as many coin clones as possible. Since each clone takes up a slot in memory, we're going to want to free up as many slots as we can. So in addition to collecting all of the coins on the course, we're also going to collect all of the 1-ups. Each 1-up occupies a slot, so by collecting it, we're freeing up a slot for another coin clone. Technically, we don't actually have to collect the 1-up, we just need to unload it. So for 1-ups that appear and then run away from Mario, we can just let those disappear, since that will unload them. But for the 1-ups that sit there on the course, and the ones that home in on Mario, we need to collect those, since those never disappear. I've also collected the 100 coin star, because that counts as an object. So at this point, all that's left are these 5 coins. These are actually the only clonable coins in the entire course. I mean, technically you could clone coins from an enemy or an item block, but as I mentioned earlier, that wouldn't actually benefit you at all. Anyway, right now I cloned a Bob-omb, and I brought it all the way to this cage. Why? Well, you'll find out in 155 coins from now. It'll all come together. But right now we can start cloning coins. Yay! So as we're cloning, each clone will occupy a slot in memory that can no longer be used. You may have noticed that I have the object counter displayed, which will help explain what's going on. You can see that it's steadily increasing as I clone the coins. Before, I mentioned that there are 240 slots in all, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. For some reason, each course seems to have its own unique upper bound on how many slots can be used. For Tick-Tock Clock, this number is 239. That means at most, we can fit 239 objects. If we try to load any more, the game would freeze, and so our goal is to fit as many clones as we can without going over 239. But as we get closer to the end, things are going to get more complicated and more difficult. We're going to have to be super precise in order to not freeze the game prematurely. So at this point, I'm actually going to collect 4 of the 5 remaining coins on the course. Technically, we only need 1 coin to clone from, so we could have done this at any point. It's just that cloning from 1 coin is a lot more difficult than cloning from 5, so I prolonged it as long as I could. We're also about to face another problem. You see, up until now, I've been grabbing fake Bob-ombs by holding them over the edge, and then grabbing them when they explode naturally. But when Bob-ombs explode naturally, they produce a lot of smoke right at the end, and so the smoke and explosion together use 9 object slots. But if you look at the object counter, you can see that we only have 8 object slots left to work with. So from now on, we need to explode the Bob-ombs prematurely by throwing them, which only uses 4 object slots. But in order to not get hit by the Bob-ombs explosion, we need to be uphill from it. Luckily, there's a little bump on this clock part that allows Mario to be slightly higher than the Bob-omb. So using this technique, we can make a couple more clones until we don't even have 4 slots to work with. At this point, we only have 3 more slots, so we can't even grab a fake Bob-omb by setting it off prematurely. I also have to be careful how I move around, because even a tiny bit of dust could freeze the game. The only way I can make another clone is by grabbing a fake Bob-omb whose fuse never even went off. If only I had the foresight to position the Bob-omb somewhere where I could pull off a tricky maneuver like that. Oh wait, I did! So, as I'm doing this, keep in mind that I can only grab a fake Bob-omb if it explodes on a surface lower than Mario. Now watch. And there we go. Now we only have 2 slots left, and that is not enough to grab another fake Bob-omb. So 279 is the maximum coin score within Tick-Tock Clock. As a side note, there are actually 2 ways to unload a Bob-omb using less than 3 slots. One way is to boil the Bob-omb. So you might be wondering, why didn't I use this when I went for the maximum coin score in Bowser in the Fire Sea? You can grab the bomb while it's boiling, but you can't grab it fake. To grab it during that, I had to use a dive, but only grabs on land can be used to grab an object fake. Dives and water grabs just don't work. The second way to unload a bomb using less than 3 slots is at the death barrier. In a previous video, I showed that you actually can grab a fake bomb this way. However, you die immediately afterwards, so there'd be no way to clone a coin out of it. One more note is that you might be wondering why I didn't collect the last coin. After all, when we got to 279, there was still 1 coin left on the course. The problem is that if you try to collect it, the game freezes, so you can't actually get it. It's kind of like a trap. If you get greedy and try to get the last coin, you can't finish the level. And then lastly, there's Rainbow Ride. Our strategy for this course will be just like the one we used for Tick-Tock Clock. First, we'll sweep through the course and collect every coin, get everyone up, kill every enemy, and collect the 100 coin star. And don't worry about that extra information on the bottom right. It's a side effect of showing the object count. That information is actually debug information about Chuckya, so it'll go away as soon as we kill him. We also have to make sure to destroy this box. That counts as an object, and so we can fit an extra coin clone by getting rid of it. Now, an interesting thing about this course is that it has a cannon. Cannons count as 2 objects. There's the base, which is the blue part with the question marks, and the shaft, which is the black cylindrical part. But if the cannon hasn't been activated yet, then the cannon isn't there. All that's there is the cannon lid, which is 1 object. So actually, activating the cannon causes an additional object that we can never get rid of. So that means we can only get the maximum coin score here before we activate the cannon. If you've already activated it, then you can never get the coin score we're about to get now. You'd always be at most 1 coin short. So that means that we can't use the cannon to get to the floating island. Instead, we have to use backwards long jumping. But this is tool assisted, so that's not a problem. Note that we don't actually need to open item blocks that contain stars, like the one on the island. Before we open an item block, the item block is 1 object. After we open it, the star is 1 object. So either way counts as 1 object. We'd have the same number of slots to use either way, unlike the cannon. So by this point, I've minimized the number of objects on the course, and I've collected every coin other than these 8, since these are the ones we'll use for cloning. But before we begin cloning, there's one more thing we need to do. I'll give you a hint. It involves cloning a bomb and placing it somewhere so we can pull off a tricky maneuver with it later. But that's all I'm gonna say about it. I mean, you should know if you've been paying attention. And now we can begin the cloning of coins. Rainbow Ride can fit a maximum of 227 objects, so believe me, we need to clone a lot of coins. So during this time, let's talk about objects. There are actually 2 tiers of objects in Super Mario 64. There are important objects and unimportant objects. Basically, all of the objects are important except for the special effects, like the smoke from a lava burn, the yellow stars from a ground pound, the poof from collecting a star, and the glow around the Koopa shell. So, what's the distinction between these 2 tiers? Well, let's say all of the object slots are filled, and you try to load a new object. This new object could be important or unimportant, it doesn't matter. Now, instead of freezing, the game will first check if any of the objects already loaded are unimportant. If it finds one, then that unimportant object will give up its slot for the new object. And if there are no unimportant objects to replace, then the game freezes. This helps prevent the game from freezing, since it will only freeze if the slots are all filled with important objects. The wind on the ship actually counts as 30 unimportant objects that are constantly loading and unloading. So, once we have less than 30 slots left, the wind particles will duke it out for those remaining slots, replacing each other constantly. You'll be able to tell because there will be less wind at once, and the particles won't be around as long. But it's important that we have at least 1 slot for the wind particles to battle for. Otherwise, the game would freeze, since they'd have nowhere to load to. They need 1 just so that they can keep overriding that 1 slot. So now I'm going to collect 7 of the 8 remaining coins. I actually can't wait any longer, otherwise the presence of the coins and the twinkle from collecting them would freeze the game. And now back to cloning, but only for a little bit, because like in Tick-Tock Clock, once we only have 8 slots left, we need to explode the bomb prematurely. I also want to do it where there's no wind, because the wind needs that 1 slot. So doing it in the presence of the wind would be like using 5 slots instead of 4. So to do this, I lure the bomb to the front of the ship, and then throw it like so. Using this, we can fit in a couple more clones.
So at this point, I only have 4 slots left, and the premature bomb explosion uses 4 slots. So not only can there be no wind during the explosion, I also can't have that last coin loaded at that time. I just cloned the coin, so it's not there at the moment, but I have to be careful to let the bomb respawn without letting the coin respawn, and there's only a really small margin to do that.
Now I can make one more coin clone, and there we go. Now I only have 3 slots left. Look at the wind. Only 3 wind particles can fit at once, and they don't last for very long because they keep getting replaced by newly loading wind particles.
But anyway, now that I only have 3 slots left, I can go back to that bomb I placed earlier. I don't have to pull off nearly as tricky a stunt as I did last time, but still, I had to look all over this course to find a spot that would work for this. But now here's the catch. We can't actually get back to the ship, because that would involve going past the blue flame on that rotating platform. That blue flame uses 17 object slots, so that would freeze the game. Luckily, we don't need to go all the way back to the ship. This platform right here is close enough so that we can load the last coin from here. And there we go. We only have 2 slots left, so like I explained earlier, we can't grab any more fake bombs, and so we can't make any more clones. Therefore, the maximum coin score we can get in Rainbow Ride is 290. Now watch Mario collect the star. There's no poof, and the star hardly has any twinkles behind it. That's how few object slots we have left. So there you go. That's the maximum coin score within each of the 15 courses. Here's a nifty little table I made that organizes all of this information. It shows the maximum coin score for every course, both the savable coin score and the coin score within the course. It's also color-coded by why that's the maximum. Well, that's everything I've ever wanted to tell you about the coin limits. So, thanks for watching!